Chapter 21 of The Car. They stood on a hill next to a group of small white stones and a large monument. A beautiful rolling prairie spread out before them, low and covered with knee-high grass leading down to a river lined with trees. It was all thick and green and soft. Meadowlarks sang around them, and it was mid-afternoon, and Terry tried to think of what it must have been like. The stones are where the bodies were found, Wayland said. All white. They all looked white to the soldiers who came and found them. White against the green grass. Several men said that. They stopped a mile away and asked each other what all the white pieces were. They thought they were bits of paper, scrap, garbage, but it was the bodies. The Custer battlefield. They had gotten up early, well before daylight, after watching bad movies and eating pizza and going to bed before 10. This time, Terry and Wayne slept on the floor, and Wayland won the toss for the bed. There had been no rain, and they had driven across the Wyoming prairie with the sun warming their backs. There had been almost nothing to see until they pulled into Sheridan and had a hamburger. Then 50 more miles up the highway, the cat wheeling along in back of the Harley until they entered Montana and came to a sign that pointed up to the small hill. It seems like such a, small place. Terry looked down the hill to the river. There were white markers scattered down a shallow ravine, and he thought they died along the way, died trying to get up to this hill. It is small, Wayland said. Everything moved on horses then, slowly, and there was no artillery, just guns and arrows. You had to be close to hit anything. All just a small engagement, he snorted. Think of it. In the Gulf War with Iraq, more people were killed in the first 7 minutes than died in all of the Indian Wars, with all of the tribes and all the armies and civilians on both sides. A tour came along, tourists following a guide. There was a building at the battlefield headquarters where tour guides gave talks, and the three of them had stopped to hear one of the lectures and look in the museum. There were guns and pictures. There was even Custer's jockstrap in a case. But it didn't seem to mean anything to Terry until they walked up the little asphalt path with rattlesnake warning signs in the battle site itself. The stones, Terry thought. The white stones. It was like seeing the bodies to him. 280 some men just gone. In less than an hour, probably. Snuffed, Wayne said, as if reading Terry's thoughts. He measured the ground with his eyes. To Terry, it seemed like an engineer or scientist studying the ground, and nodded. They must have thought they could hold if they got up here. Good terrain, high ground. Drop the horses and get down in back of them. Too many, Wayland interrupted. Way too many Indians. Thousands, and smart. While the fight was going on, Crazy Horse took a big group of warriors back around the hill to cut off retreat, and they swarmed up and over Custer and the rest of his men before they could set up a reaction. Bad fields of fire. Bad perimeter. Bad luck, Wayne finished. That too. All the bad luck there is. Poor bastards. Wayland nodded. Nobody won this one. What do you mean? Terry turned from the stone marking the mass grave at the top of the hill. I thought the Indians won. Wayland shook his head. Maybe this fight, but the battle set off a public reaction across the country, around the world. They lost any hope of a good settlement, if there ever was hope. The United States came after them with whole armies, slaughtered them, drove them to the ground, and after the Custer battle. But wasn't it all the white man's fault? Terry sat on a small corner of the monument. Wayland nodded. They broke treaties, took everything from the Indians. But it wasn't these soldiers who did that. It was prospectors, railroad tycoons, bankers, That's who stole the land, and these soldiers were sent to deal with it. Hell, most of them didn't even want to come out here. Irish immigrants trying to find the pot of gold in America, and the recruiters talked them into coming west. Custer's desertion rate was something over 10% per month. The soldiers were the losers, and the Indians, of course. He looked at the body markers, the prairie dropping around them. Only the bankers won, and the politicians. They spent the rest of the day at the battlefield, later moving down to the points defended by Reno and Benteen. They made it here, Wayne said. Look at the shallow pits they dug when they established the perimeter. It was a bad defensive position, but they made the best of it, and they held. Like it could have been another Custer, but they held. Terry smiled. Wayne seemed to be thinking like Whalen in military terms and jargon. You talk like it happened yesterday. Wayne nodded. Some things never change. They had different weapons, but they still have to have a perimeter, defensive positions, firepower, interlocking fields of fire. For the grunt, it's always the same, no matter when. Whalen nodded, but didn't say anything, and instead led the way through the secondary battle site. There was a small circular walk that led around to posts with written information on them, pointing to the different aspects of interest. Reno and Benteen had come in from different angles with their men, supposedly to support Custer, but they had run into overwhelming forces. One of the scouts said there were so many hostile Indians that the soldiers couldn't carry enough bullets to kill them all. Whalen said, there might have been 2, 3, maybe even 4,000 warriors, maybe 10 or 15 warriors to each soldier, maybe more, and these guys held. How? Terry looked down to the river. There were ravines, gullies for the Indians to use for cover. Why didn't they run over these men like they did Custer and his men? Wayne laughed, but there was no humor in it. A soft sound mixing with the meadowlark song and soft buzz of flies, because they didn't want to. Whalen nodded. That's part of it. They worried that other soldiers were coming, bigger forces, that would wipe them out. And they were right. So they fought here for the day and gathered up their wounded and dead and left. He pointed to a range of snow-capped peaks in the distance, up there. They ran into the Big Horn Mountains and hid. The peaks looked mysterious, beautiful. Terry had been watching them all day. Can we go there next? Into the Bighorns? Whalen turned. Into the mountains? Yes. Could we go see them? It's up to Wayne, Whalen said. It's his pick next. Wayne wasn't listening to them. He was looking down the slope to the Little Bighorn, the river winding peacefully through the trees. They say Reno freaked, man. Major Reno was the man commanding one of the groups that was supposed to support Custer. He did, Whalen said, nodding. The man next to him took one in the side of the temple, and his brains blew all over Reno's face. He couldn't handle it, and started screaming, lost control completely, and his men took off, ran up this hill. Just from that? A hit on somebody else? Wayne asked. Yeah, Whalen nodded. That and about a zillion Indians coming at him. Man, just a wound and he freaks. The kid wants to go into the mountains next, Whalen said. You up for that? What? Wayne was still looking down the river. Oh, yeah, sure. We'll head back down to Buffalo and cross there. Get up to the high country. Cowboy country, Whalen said. Real cowboys? Terry asked. Outside of a movie now, and then he had never thought of them much. Are there still real cowboys? Right on, Wayne said, laughing. Maybe we can find you a rodeo. Get with the guys with the big hats. And horses? We'll try. Far out, Terry said. Waylon and Wayne looked at each other and smiled. And that's the end of chapter 21.